All the students we've got here today are from across the Priory Learning Trust. So we've got students from World School, Priory School, the King Alfred School in Highbridge, Castlebatch and St Anne's. We're also joined, hi there Nigel, I can see you there. Thank you for joining us today, by Nigel Dando, who is a great supporter and trainer of our students. So nice to see you, Nigel, thank you.
And you, thanks.
As well as other colleagues that support the centres and the students across the trust. So I'm going to hand you straight over to Dawson, who is going to be hosting this for us today. So Dawson, over to you, please.
Hi Mike, hi everyone. So I'd just like to welcome everybody to this Jill Dando TV interview, especially welcome to you. So we do all these different interviews where we each ask a question, and we've all prepared a question like Miss Davis said, and we've all got a question to ask you about various different subjects from all of our journalists across all the schools. Would you like to do a little introduction about yourself and who you are and where you work?
I'd be happy to, Dawson. So thank you for inviting me. Do you know what? Over the last few weeks, as Liz was talking about, we've had lots of good news about Burnbeck Island. So I've been on the BBC News, and I've been on the ITV News, and I've been on BBC Radio Bristol. I've been on all sorts. And I'll be really honest, I'm more nervous about doing this than I was doing any of those. So treat me nicely, be kind to me. But I'm really excited to be doing it. I've been on the crew for 22 years, I think now. So I remember as a Boy Scout looking across at that island and seeing the big red doors and the slipway coming down from the island, and having this real yearning to be part of whatever it was that was going on there. So I must have been 7 years old, maybe as a scout or a cub probably. And I remember going across there, having a visit, and it was just always a boyhood fascination, I think. And when I'd been to university and I settled back in Western and got a job, that was the time when I really thought, okay, now's the time to ask about how I get involved. And I wrote to the boss at the time, and he said, well, fine, come on down, see how you get on, and we'll go from there. Well, that was 22 years ago, and I very quickly went from being a helper in the boathouse to being on board the boat as a crewman, progressed to being a helmsman, so that qualifies me to taking the boat to sea. And 2.5 years ago, I also took on the role of the volunteer lifeboat operations manager. So not only am I helmsman at the station, but I'm also the boss now. So yes, that's kind of my 22-year career so far. So back to you, Dawson, to start me with some questions.
Great, yeah, thank you. It sounds like you've been very busy. Firstly, my first question to you is, if the repairs do go ahead, how long do you think it will be from now before you manage to launch them for the first time?
Oh, do you know what? That's a great question. And it's not one I know exactly. In fact, I definitely don't know the answer to, but we've got a number of processes to go through. The first process that's got to happen is what's called a compulsory purchase order. And that is what the council are working on at the moment. They haven't even voted for it yet. That's going to happen on the 14th of this month, which I believe is next week. So if that gets approved by the council, then that process will start going through the courts. And that's a very complicated legal process. And that could take up to 18 months. So that's the first real hurdle that we have to get over. And now, if that doesn't work, and I'm no legal expert, if that doesn't work and the RNLI or the council and then the RNLI don't become the owners of the pier, then the project stops right there. But I'm going to think positive. I'm going to assume that happens, and so we do become the owners of the pier. During the period of the CPO, the compulsory purchase order, there will be some sort of planning and costings and further works. I mean, we've done some work to work out what we think it's going to cost and the effort to put it back to its sort of rightful status and then put the lifeboats out there. But we still want to do some more work to really be sure on our budgets. But assuming that we become the owners of the pier, we can then start to work on building, refurbishing, and all the. I mean, there's so much work, as you can imagine, both to the pier, the structure, demolition of all those old buildings that need taking down on the island, and then, you know, from our specific needs, the actual lifeboat station itself and a new slipway and everything else and all the facilities that we need. So, if I had to guess, I'd be chuffed to bits if we were there in 5 years' time. Do I think that's realistic? I hope so. It's a really tough one, but I think 5 years is 4 to 5 years is probably a good kind of finger in the air. Other than that, we'll see what happens.
Next up, we have our first question from Tamsin. Do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, so my question is basically because I'm part of a sailing club, but then we haven't been able to start back again because the rescue boat wouldn't be able to pull people out of the sea if we capsized. And my question is, how hard does having to social distance while working on the lifeboat and rescuing people from the sea make it at the moment?
That's a great question. Cool. These are good. I like them already. Second question's straight out. Brilliant. So COVID has given us a huge amount of challenge, actually. Obviously, as you know, in a small boat, it's impossible to socially distance. 2 meters. We would certainly struggle in the small boat to get 2 people, end to end almost on the boat, and certainly 3 crew. You're stuffed, and then you add casualties into that as well. There's just no opportunity. So we've got to do a number of things, really. First of all, we need to be aware of our own health, and we've got an agreement amongst the team that if you even think you're slightly sick, under the weather, whatever, you will not turn out to the boathouse at the moment. We're not doing any training, so we're not allowed to train at all. The only reason we turn out is for call-outs, for shouts. So if there's an emergency, we turn up. If not, we all stay away. Over the last 3 or 4 months, what we have done as well is something that I implemented is I split our team down the middle. Because the vast majority were working from home, I created a team A and a team B, and we were covering the rescue service 24 hours on and 24 hours off. So at lunchtime every day, one team would come off duty and the other one would go on duty. And that would enable us to make sure that if somebody did get sick over that period, they wouldn't have then infected the whole team. The risk would have been they would have only infected half the team. And perhaps it was somebody in team B. Team B would have maybe had to take time off and recover. Team A could have kept the service running. What we're trying to do is make sure that whatever happens, we can still provide our rescue service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of COVID. As we're finding people now are starting to go back to work, we've had to disband the team A and B, but we're always mindful of, what can we do to protect ourselves? So when we turn up to a call out, everybody turns up, we get the boats away, and then the management team will look around and say, right, okay, how many, because sometimes you get loads of volunteers turn up, sometimes you get the bare minimum. Where we can send people home to get people away from the situation, we will do. We're mindful of social distancing. On the boats, we've got rubber gloves, we've got visors, we're obviously in dry suits, we've got face masks, so we've got that ability to put on that PPE if we need to, although trying to put on a face mask with water splashing up over you isn't very easy, I have to say. So it's one of those decisions that the crew have to make for themselves, really. If they bring on board a casualty who they have no knowledge of, they will put the gloves, they will put the masks on. If they're on a small boat with each other and they're actually going out just to in the initial part of a rescue, they might not have that extra PPE, but they've certainly got their dry suit and their visor and their helmet. So it's a really tough one. We can't protect completely, but we do our best. Principally we want to maintain our service as well. So it's a tough one.
Okay, so we'll move on to Jack Clark, please.
Hi, my question is, how will the RNLI deal with the extra pressure this summer because of the coronavirus, as so many people are flocking to the beaches?
Another good question, Jack. I don't think we'll do any different, to be honest. I think we'll just be busier. But part of that depends on the weather, doesn't it? And if you remember, was it the year before last? I'm just trying to remember. We had a really, really hot June and July, and I think it was last year or maybe even the year before, and we had something like 20 call-outs in about 3 weeks of July. So for us, to put that into perspective, our station probably gets 40 to 50 calls in a year. That year we hit a record and we cleared over 60 calls in the whole year, and 20 of those were in that month of July when we had an absolute heat wave. So most of our people, well, we all live in town. Most of our people work in and around town, and particularly now with COVID, more of our team, including myself, are working from home more than we are away. So, we've got enough people to cover it. I guess our team are less likely to be going away on holidays elsewhere. They'll probably be doing a staycation as well. So we'll have enough people to cover it, and we're always ready to respond to the pager. So I don't think it'll make a huge difference in terms of our ability. We'll still be able to do it. It'll just be, we'll be busier.
Great, thank you. Next, we are going to Emma Hewson, please.
Hi, as a lifeboat operations manager, how will restoring Birkbeck Pier benefit you?
Oh, Emma, I can't tell you how important it is for us to get back to Birnbeck. So you live in Whirl or Weston, I think, don't you? Do I recognise your name? Are you at Castlebatch?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I recognised that name. Right, so you live in Whirl. You obviously know what, well, I'm sure everybody around here knows exactly what it's like down at Weston. The tide goes out for miles. You can see it disappears for hours and hours and hours, and all you see is the mud flats, isn't it? And so what makes life really difficult for lifeboating in Weston is getting the boats into the water at all states of the tide. It's fine when it's high tide and the water's in Knightstone Harbour, very easy. Straight down the slipway and in we go. The challenge for us is at lower states of tide is to get the boat out across the mud, and we have a special tractor which can take the smaller boat that we have out across the mud and get us out to the water nearer to Birnbeck Pier, because that's the best position. That's where really the only space in Western Bay where there is water 24 hours a day. The people, the Victorians that built the pier and the lifeboat station out there, they weren't daft. They built it there for a reason. They built it because that's the place in Weston that has water all the time. So we've looked, can you believe we've looked at 14 different sites over the last few years to try and find a location for our lifeboat station. And we've really struggled. And at a meeting a number of years ago, I remember saying to the RNLI management, I said, you're asking the wrong question. Stop asking, where are we going to build a lifeboat station? That doesn't matter. What I said to them was, work out a way that we can get our lifeboats into the water, both of them, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It doesn't, you know, we've got to solve this problem of getting across the mud. And being back at Birnbeck, to answer your question, solves all of those problems. That long slipway that used to exist and now comes a little way down and then stops because we had to cut it off because it was so dangerous. That slipway, if we rebuild it and in fact make it slightly longer than it ever used to be, which is before you were even around, it'll go down way into what we call the gut, which is a very small channel of water which runs between Birnbeck Island and the mainland. And so getting back to Birnbeck is absolutely critical and gives us the best opportunity for saving lives in and around Weston. It's absolutely the best place for us to be. And I've got everything crossed for us getting back there.
Now we're going to Casey, please, for your question.
Hello, Mike. My question is, do you have to do any special training in order to become an RNLI?
Hi, Katie. Yes, we do. We train constantly. So when you join up, there's no specific requirement. You don't have to be great in a boat or good at tying knots or good at first aid, any of those things. But what we really look for initially is somebody who's keen, who has the right attitude, who wants to be part of a team, who, is somebody who just wants to fit in with the rest of the team. Because if you don't fit in, then you're going to struggle, really. So the first thing we do is we invite people down, and they come down and they kind of come to training every week and hang around with the shore-based team and just get to know people, really, and see how they fit in, ask questions. And once we know that they're going to fit in, then we invite them to formally enroll, and they start with shore-based training. So they learn about the launch and recovery of the boats, about the cleaning of the boats, about the fueling of the boats, about how to prepare the boat to go to sea, because there are certain bits of equipment we don't store on there all the time. So when the pager goes and we go to the boathouse, we need to get certain bits on the boat ready to go to sea. So they learn those things over probably their first year as part of our team. And then if there's somebody who wants to progress on to other roles, so they could become a tractor driver. So again, for those that have seen either of our boats, both of them are on different trailers. They both have different tractors. They are very, very different in terms of the way they drive. So our people have to train carefully and consistently to drive those tractors, because if you think, the area where we launched down by the Marine Lake in the middle of summer is absolutely rammed with holidaymakers. Adults, children, dogs, pushchairs, it's chaos down there. And those rigs, when they're moving around, those boats and trailers and vehicles are big and heavy. It's sometimes very hard to see. So our drivers have to train a huge amount and work very carefully with the people in the team to make sure they get the boats from the boathouse to the water very safely. And then you've got the boat crew. If you progress from shore crew onto the boat, you learn how to read a chart. You learn how to work the radio. You learn about first aid. You learn about navigation. You learn about all sorts of things. And then as you become an experienced crewman, you might have the opportunity then to move on to be what's called a helmsman, which is what I mentioned earlier on. A helmsman is the person that probably drives the boat, but certainly is in command of the boat. They are the person that makes those decisions when that boat goes to sea. and they take what we call on-scene command of any situation that we go to. And so to do all of those things, to have all of those skills, to maintain all of those skills, to be able to just do them without thinking is critical. So to answer your question, yes, we have to train all the time. You imagine going to sleep at night and the pager going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get out of bed, you have to get dressed, you have to drive to the lifeboat station, and you're still a bit bleary-eyed, and you have to then get on the boat and go and do something. It can't be something that you have to think to. It has to be second nature. It has to be drilled into you. You have to train and train and train to do these things just most of the time without thinking, because sometimes you're not very with it in the middle of the night. It's got to come naturally. So training is absolutely key, and we do it all the time. Although not right now, because as I said earlier, COVID stopped us, and the bosses at the RNLI won't let us, because that's just putting more pressure and more risk into our lives from a COVID perspective. But as soon as we can get that under control, maybe there'll be a vaccine, we'll be straight back out there. The guys every week are bothering me. Mike, can we go training yet? Mike, have we been allowed to go training yet? Can we get back out there? So it's key, and people love it.
Now can we go to Tom, please, for your question?
Hi. Do people tend to donate when you have rescues them?
Well, that's a good question. Do you know what? Some do that we know about, certainly, because some people come back and give us money, or they let us know afterwards they've decided to organise an event maybe to raise some money. I should imagine there are probably some people that donate afterwards but don't let us know. You know, sometimes people are embarrassed about what they've done. They've got themselves into a bit of a pickle. And so they're perhaps embarrassed, so they probably donate quietly and privately. And I'm sure there's also people that don't. It's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, do I expect everybody to? No, I think that would be unrealistic. Would I, if I'd been rescued? Absolutely, because I'd be probably embarrassed and, you know, feel a debt that I owe to that organisation and those volunteers that have come and rescued me. So I think I would. But we can't expect that from everybody. Not everybody can afford to do that. But, you know, I'm sure some do, and some we know about, and some don't at all. There's a whole mixture. And some of them donate in different ways. Maybe they don't donate to the charity, but they bring us a bag of coffee and tea and biscuits, or a crate of beer, or, you know, a cream cake. We've had all sorts. So, you know, people donate in different ways. Sometimes to the piggy bank of the RNLI, and sometimes to our bellies.
Welcome. Move on to Jack Maydew, please.
Hello, and my question is, when the RNLI had to leave Birnbeck Pier, what problems did it cause, especially with finding a new place to launch?
Oh, yes, cool. That I've got to rack my brains now and think. So we knew we were in trouble for a long time because nobody wanted to take on the ownership of the pier, and we gradually moved off the pier, really, because at one point the slipway, I mentioned earlier on that we had to cut off the big metal slipway that came out of the big red doors. And from that point onwards, we couldn't operate our boats out of there. So what we then had to do was put our boats on tractors and trailers. And they came down a concrete ramp on the opposite side of the pier, down onto the beach, and we operated that way for a while. But we then got to the point where the pier structure itself, so the planks going across from the land to the island, and more important, the planks were fine, but it was the metalwork underneath that in some places is sort of held up by, well, fresh air, I think, and just good luck. I'm terrified every time we see people on Birnbeck Island, and then you know, broken in and got over there, or they've walked across the beach and then they walk back across the pier, and it just terrifies me that one day something is going to give way and people are going to fall through. But hopefully, you know, we'll get to our point in our project where we can refurbish it before then. But once we got to moving ashore, before we sort of made that move, we were having discussions with the council. And the council, although I'm sure they preferred us not to be putting our shipping container style temporary boathouse on the plaza there at Marine Lake, there wasn't really much choice. We had to have a location where we could get the boats to the water. That was a challenge. I think there was probably a period of time where we could literally only work out of Knightstone Harbour. So we probably had a period of time where we couldn't get the boats out over the mud because we hadn't trialled it. We didn't know how we were going to do that safely. So it restricted our ability. We certainly weren't operating 24 hours a day. But now we've got that ability. We can continue with that as long as we need to, but it's not the greatest thing to do, particularly in the dark. So, you know, it's definitely the best place, as I said to somebody else. Moving back to Birnbeck is absolutely where we need to be. but the council have worked, and the council have been hugely supportive of us. Now, I'm sure from a holiday destination perspective, North Somerset Council need us, because it's a destination where millions of people come, people use the beaches. God forbid somebody dies on our beach, that would be horrific. So that wouldn't be great for the town and the town's economy. We're a key part of the town, but we work with the council, and the council have been great to us. So big thank you to North Somerset for everything they do for us.
Now we are going to Olivia Montgomery, please.
Hi, my question is, what more do you think could be done to stop visitors to Weston getting stuck at low tides and having to call the RNLI unnecessarily?
Oh, Olivia, I don't know. I wish I did know. But do you know what? It's a really difficult one. Hundreds of people walk out across that mud every year. On a hot day, you can see them, and we stand there and we watch. They all walk out, and the vast majority walk back absolutely fine. So it's a really difficult challenge for us to convince the public that it's not safe, because they see people do it, they walk out, they walk back. And I've seen people on social media where people have made accusations and said the Coast Guard or the RNLI are scaremongering, and they're really not helping the situation, because they're trying to put people off doing it, and actually it's fine and safe to do that. And I don't get involved in that kind of social media arguing, but I know for a fact that it's not safe to do that. It's about luck. You either get lucky, and the vast majority are lucky, they walk out and they walk back safely. But a very small number of people do genuinely get stuck. And I've been out on a rescue, and it was a number of years ago, where I rescued a lady who was out for a day at the beach with her niece and her nephew. When we rescued her, she was chest deep in water. She was stuck in the mud. She couldn't move. She was holding her 6-year-old niece on her hips and clutching her, holding her to keep her above the water. Her 10-year-old nephew was treading water next to her, keeping himself afloat, and their dog was swimming circles around them. And so it upsets me hugely that people will put information on social media saying you can't get stuck in the mud. I've looked in the eyes of a lady who could have lost her life had we not been there. So it is absolutely dangerous. But the trouble is, you can't put a wall of signs up. You can't put a fence up. You can't stop people doing it. All we can do is keep sharing our own opinion and our experience and say it's not a safe thing to do, because you're taking a gamble. Will you come back safe, or will you get stuck? Obviously, I'd rather everybody comes back safe, but I'd rather, to be honest, that people don't take the risk in the first place and they maybe use the water in the marine lake. It's a really difficult one. I don't think we'll ever win that battle. People will always do it. People have always done it, and they'll continue to do it. We'll never win.
Now we're going to move on to Shannon for her question, please.
Hello, Mike. My
Hello.
question is, what are your visions for the new Burnback Pier, and how do you expect it to be used?
Oh dear. Well, so I think first and foremost, we'll have great lifeboat rescue facilities. That's the most important thing. So if you look across to that boathouse at the moment, which was built in 1902, the one with the big red doors, and in that boathouse there is literally the hall at the bottom, which is a big space where the two boats are pulled into on trolleys with a winch, and then you go up sort of almost vertical steps to a small room upstairs, which in the past has been our sort of meeting room, chart room, office, kitchen, everything. And that's not really a great facility for a modern day lifeboat station. So if we get to refurbish that and use that space for some of what we need, then we'll definitely be building a second building on the island, which will give us more facilities. We need better facilities for the mechanics so they can do better maintenance on our boats. We need better facilities for the crew, so we have a proper classroom, effectively, like you would at school, so we can train and do work in a classroom. We need a better catering, proper kitchen, so we can make a cup of coffee or bring people back who have been out in the cold and make them a cup of tea and warm them up. We need showers. We need all sorts of facilities, and we can actually do that with a proper, modern building, not something from 100 odd years ago. So that's the first thing that I would say from our facilities. And then I think there'll be other things we need to do. One we'll be building, I think, probably a building for a cafe, that kind of thing. I mean, who doesn't love a coffee and a cake? or a milkshake or anything else. See, there you go. That put a smile on your face, didn't it? Coffee and cake. Happy days. So I think we'll definitely have a cafe over there. We'll have our shop. We'll be able to have a much better facility for our souvenir shop, which we currently have at Anchorhead, which is in a bit of a sort of a dark, damp cave, if you've ever been in there. I mean, it's great, and our fundraisers do a fantastic job. But if we can give them a modern facility to sell more, do more, raise more money, that'd be amazing. And then who knows what? There's a few other discussions going on in the background that I can't share with you at this point in time. But there's lots of ideas and lots of things that maybe might come to fruition. We'd like to make a bit of a museum out there as well, a lifeboat museum. So maybe we can get one or two of our old lifeboats that were in Weston years and years ago that still exist, and we know where they are. One of them's in a boatyard, I think, in Ireland. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could bring back one of our old-fashioned lifeboats that used to serve at Weston, get it all made up to how it used to be, and have that as a museum piece, and other features and other things to attract people. And hopefully, there'll be a good few hours of entertainment over there for families, individuals, whatever, things that people will want to come and see and spend time over there. That'll hopefully then raise a few pounds for us, which will enable us to keep the pier in great shape. And hopefully Burnbeck will never, ever deteriorate into the state that it is now.
We're now moving on to Emma Latchford for her question, please.
Hi, how often on average do you get a call out?
Hi, Emma. I know you. I know your face, don't I? We get called normally 40 to 50 times a year. So on average, you can say that's one a week. But the reality is, and it probably doesn't surprise you, we get more in the summer and less in the winter. That's kind of obvious, I suppose, because more people are out and about, more people are walking, more people are on the beach, more people are fishing, swimming, boating, all of those things that inevitably end up with people getting stuck or caught out or injured and needing our assistance. But I would say on average, one call a week, but less in the winter and more in the summer.
Now can we try returning to Olivia Finch, please?
Hi, my question is, when you're rescuing someone, how do you make sure that you keep a focused mindset and stay level-headed in that high adrenaline situation?
Cool, that's a good question too. Do you know what I think it comes back to? Was it Katie that asked me earlier about training? I've probably got the name wrong now. I've tried to look like I've paid attention. I've completely messed it up probably. But it's all about training. Remember I said about people doing things and it becomes second nature. You don't necessarily, you're not panicking because you're so comfortable. You're comfortable with your crew around you. You know that the two guys or girls with you, they're confident and capable. You're capable. The boat you've got is outstanding. The equipment we have is amazing, and you train regularly. So it's all of those things, and the fact that we're quite. This sounds wrong, but I'll explain what I mean. We're quite lucky at Weston as a crew that we get called out quite often, and so therefore we're having shouts regularly, which allows us to be used to controlling that adrenaline. Other stations don't get so many calls, and therefore probably, and I'm guessing, but they probably, if they only get a call, some stations only get like 3, 4, 5 calls a year. So you imagine you could go months with nothing. And so suddenly the adrenaline will be huge. And I would imagine it's harder to control. I don't know, and I may be wrong. But of course, let me just clarify. I don't wish, that we got called out more often. I don't want people to be in trouble. But the reality is people do get into trouble. So, by going out fairly often, it helps us because we're used to managing that adrenaline. And I think probably the longer you do it for, so I've been doing it 22 years, when the pager goes, I get in the car and I kind of pookle down there and get on with whatever I've got to do. I think that if you asked me that question 10 or 15 years ago, I would have probably been a bit more excited and a bit more kind of, high on adrenaline, but you just have to calm that down because, you have to be in control and you have to be, capable of doing what you're doing in a calm, controlled environment, as you rightly point out, because actually, if you've got somebody who needs rescuing, they're probably in distress. So if we come over all a bit overexcited or a bit, wired on adrenaline, that's not great. We need to be that calm, cool, reassuring face and voice that turns up and helps get them out of that sticky situation, whatever it is.
Now can we move on to Freddie for his question, please?
Yeah, hello, Mike. What type of qualities do you need to become a volunteer for the RNLI?
Hi, Freddie. So I think it's about being great at working in a team, being keen to get stuck in and get your hands dirty. Lots of the stuff we do just needs people to put in the time, put in the effort. And do you know what one of the really important things is? It's not about the individual, it's about their family. Every person could be if you fancy joining the lifeboat crew when you're older, you could be as keen as you like. But if your parents or your wife or your partner or your kids or whoever weren't supportive of you, then you are stuffed from the get-go. I absolutely couldn't do what I do without the support of my wife and my kids. Because, let me explain why. I remember my kids are now 13 and 16. When they were, I don't know, 5 and 7, something like that, I remember going out for probably what you do with your mum and dad every now and again. Every year you go out into town and you go to the shoe shop and you have to buy your new school shoes. Every child hates that. And let me tell you, every parent hates that too. It's hard work because no kid wants to do it. No parent wants to listen to the moaning and the whining. But we did that years ago and my pager went off and we had 2 small children trying on school shoes. I had the keys to the car and I left my wife in the high street with the pushchair, with 2 kids, with no keys to the car to get home, and I ran to the boathouse and left her stranded. You've got to be a pretty patient husband or wife to allow your partner to abandon you in situations like that, let me tell you. So I have to say that I feel hugely fortunate, Freddie, that my wife and my kids have always known it because I've been doing it since before they were both born. But I feel very fortunate that they allow me to do something that I'm hugely passionate about. So I have to be keen. I have to be, want to get stuck in, and I have to be passionate and willing to give up the time and, all those team spirit things. But actually, all of that would be irrelevant if my family didn't support me because they'd give me such a hard time. And here he goes, he's off again, or he's left us in the middle of dinner, or abandoned us in a restaurant, or all of those situations. Because believe me, over 22 years, I've done it all. And generally, occasionally there might have been a little whinge and a moan, but broadly, never. So yeah, it's all about having family support as well as your own desire and energy and passion to get involved.
Now, unfortunately, Archie can't be with us today, but I do have his question, which is, if the RNLI is able to return to Burnbeck Pier, what long-term impact would this have on the RNLI service?
Right. See, Archie throws in a wicked question and doesn't even turn up for it. He's still throwing me a difficult one, even though he's not here. So what will it have on the impact on its service? So, well, in terms of our rescue service, it will enable us to launch faster and get to people more quickly, because the fact that we can put our boats into the water at the bottom of a slipway rather than have to get to the station, drive the tractors across the rocks and the mud and everything else, and you have to do that quite slowly and carefully because otherwise it's all going to get damaged. Our launch time at anything where the tide is outside of Knightstone Harbour, our launch time is slow. And obviously sometimes, not always, sometimes minutes or even seconds count. If we can't get there in the fastest time possible, people can die. Touch wood, generally, we're pretty good. We've got a great track record in Western. But let me take you back to Bank Holiday Monday at the end of May. Only 6 weeks ago, maybe? 2 people were on Burnbeck Island. They'd walked over there at low tide, and when they realised that decided it was time to go back, they got down to the bottom of the slipway, and they found that the tide was rushing across that pebble bank, and they couldn't see the ground anymore. But they thought, that's okay. We know where the path is. We know where the beach and the pebbles are. We'll just walk back across. How hard can it be? We'll just get wet feet. Well, they got part way across. The water is pushing across there at probably between 3 and 5 miles an hour. Now, if you think about being in the car and going at 3 and 5 miles an hour, that's not very fast. But let me tell you, that much water pushing at 3 to 5 miles against you will not be able to stand up. And sure enough, they got swept off their feet and off those rocks and into the water. Somebody then dived in from the shore, thinking he was going to help them. So we've now got 3 casualties in the water, all being swept away by the tide. That tide is so strong in this area, they didn't have a chance. And they, I should say, were very lucky. We had just launched the boat to get to some people who had a small dinghy and somebody who'd been injured trying to get back to shore. So our guys were over near the Grand Pier, but they were on the water. So at the moment we heard they were even on the slipway, we were sort of aware of we might have to drop these casualties off and then go back and pick the guys up from Birnbeck. And moments later, the Coast Guard came on the radio and they said the 2 people have stepped into the water. At that point, and to come back to what Olivia said, the adrenaline really starts running, let me tell you. Because we know with our experience, that's terrifying, and those guys are really minutes away from dying. The boat got back on the water, and to come to one of the points that somebody made earlier on about social distancing in the boat, bear in mind at this point in our smaller boat, we've got 3 crew and 2 casualties and a half-deflated dinghy. And they then, they drove the boat round Birnbeck Island and came up on the Sand Bay side, and the Coast Guard on the radio called up and they talked them into where these guys were in the water. And they managed to pick 2 of them out of the water, the couple that had walked off the island. They picked them up, and then they were directed in and picked the 3rd guy up. And they got everybody back to safety. So that was 8 people then in that boat. We've since had a message from those people, and it's absolutely terrifying to think that, and the lady said, I don't know where you came from, but you were absolute heroes. I'd said my final goodbyes to my partner. And I can't imagine what that's like. But that just shows you that every second counts. We were lucky that day, we were on the water. So being able to get our boat into the water from Birnbeck much, much more quickly, that's exactly how it's going to enhance the RNLI's lifeboat service there. Now, on top of that, if we can do something about, having an attraction there in terms of a museum, which educates people more, or maybe we can have an education centre, which is for young people to come and learn about the dangers of the sea. Who knows? There's so much space there. We've got so many opportunities, but it'll all be about funding and, what we think is the best way to spend the money. But all of those things are potential. But the bottom line is we can get our boats in the water, more stakes of the tide, 24 hours a day, more quickly to save lives. And that's the bottom line.
We have a question from Mrs. DL. She's asking if Dr. Hart, who used to teach at King Alfred's, is still staying safe and is behaving herself at the RNLI.
Well, that's a very good question. Dr. Hart. She'll be impressed that she was referred to as Dr. Hart. Yes, Dr. Hart, or Leslie, as I call her, is behaving herself. She was on the Burnham-on-Sea lifeboat crew, and a year or so ago, maybe, I was asked by her whether she was moving to live in Whirl, and could she transfer to our crew. So we did let her in, and so far she's behaving herself, but we're keeping an eye on her, don't worry.
Okay, now we're moving on to asking if Nigel Dando has any questions for you.
Yeah, hi Mike, interesting stuff, being a member of the lifeboat crew in Weston. I was just wondering, every operation carries its risks. What's the most dangerous operation that you and the crew have ever been on? Can you remember?
Oh dear, I think it's weather driven, probably, because I think one of those things that people generally think about with lifeboats, they always think we're out in the dark, it's stormy, it's raining, it's that stereotypical kind of scenario. I mean, the reality is probably we go out in the sunshine, when it's pleasant weather most of the time. But I think probably it's weather that impacts us and makes it the most dangerous. And it's going out in seas and weather that is just probably on the limits, if not past the limits on paper of our boats. But if somebody's in the water, then we will push our training and our skills and our equipment as far as we dare. So yeah, I think in all honesty, I would probably reflect on a couple of jobs, and I remember getting back onto dry land afterwards and thinking afterwards, didn't think about it at the time, was completely comfortable. Again, back to other people's questions and my answers earlier. The equipment and the training just comes into play. You just get on with it. You deal with it. You deal with it in the moment. It's afterwards that you come back and you think, "Whew, that could have gone one of two ways." Fortunately, it went the way we wanted it to, and we all came back safe. But actually, yeah, that was a bit close at times. But it's often afterwards that you reflect on that rather than during, I think.
Okay, Mike, thanks very much.
Thank you. Now, does Neville Coles have any questions for you?
Oh, now I'm in trouble.
Thanks, Dawson. Brilliantly done again. Fantastic hosting and fantastic questions. Yeah, Mike, from me, just again, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate everything. Yeah, two things from me, 2 questions. I really like animals, Mike. Have you ever been involved in saving animals, particularly dogs? I like dogs. Any dog saving stories at all?
Yeah, go on. No, go on. Ask me 2 if you want. I'll see if I can.
Well, the other one we always ask is, how do you think we can inspire these young people to do great things? Have you got any thoughts on inspiration for the kids on the Jill Dando Centre? We really want to, think it's a big world out there, lots of opportunities. So, any thoughts on inspiration, and what advice would you give the kids on here today?
Well, okay, so let me do the dog one first. So yes, frequently, sadly, we had a bit of a run last year, I think, on dogs. And I can only say it's down to careless owners, to be honest, because it's generally dogs going off bream down tends to be the regular one. I'd say we get a mix of outcomes, sadly, or positively, depending on which way you look at it. Dogs are amazingly resilient, and we frequently go out to dogs where, and this is, nationally, the sort of known fact is that if a dog goes in, the chances are that the owner will go in too. However, there's an awful lot of documented evidence to say the dog will generally get themselves out on their own. So the people should stay out, and the dog will probably have a greater chance of surviving than the person. So we generally will respond on the basis that the dog might well get out, but if we don't respond, the people might not. So, if we go and rescue the dog, there's less chance of them getting in, and then less chance of that whole situation escalating. But yeah, we frequently go out to dogs. We've been out to horses, we've been out to cows, we've been out to sheep, we've been out to deer. A deer being another example of, there was 2 years ago, a baby or a very young deer was floundering around in the mud in Sam Bay, and there were people on the shore all sort of threatening, if that's the right word, to go out and do something to support and help this animal. And our view was, let's just get out there, let's get the deer on board and bring it back, and help it out, rather than these people put themselves at risk. So that's generally animal stuff, is let's get out and deal with it before people put themselves at risk. At least we've got the right equipment, or at least safe equipment, a safe platform. We've got life jackets, we've got all of those things to help us in those situations. So that's your dog bit. Inspiration. Wow. In terms of, do you know what? Inspiring these guys, I'm not sure you need to do a lot to inspire these guys, because I have to say, and I said at the beginning of this, I've done a lot of stuff, particularly around Burnbeck recently, with people from the news. And I've been really disappointed in some of the way that people have, some of these reporters conduct themselves and have behaved or spoken, or the stress and the pressure of what they're doing is sort of pushed onto me as the novice, as it were, in this situation. And I have to say, I've been and I'm not just saying this, I've been really bowled over by the preparation these guys have done, the confidence that they're speaking with. And I think, and I'm sure you are, Neville, you should be hugely proud of these guys. They don't need much inspiration. They're there. They're going to fly, in whatever they choose to do. Because if at, the young ages, and that sounds terribly patronising, and I don't mean it to, but if at this young age they've got the confidence, and I'm gonna pick him out by name, but Dawson, you've done a fantastic job today, and I don't know if this is your role or other people have done it, do it too, but to sit there and really confidently host this is a huge job. And there are people in the BBC and ITV who would, be jealous of your skills already, so I don't think I need to inspire these guys. I think they've nailed it already, and they should just keep their heads down, keep doing what they're doing. These are great kids, and they're going places.
Yeah, we're just trying to work on Nigel's skills at the minute, Mike, so we're doing that.
I'm a hopeless case, Mike. Sorry about that.
I was all right with Nigel. I was worried about you, Neville, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, well,
I'm beyond redemption. Don't know about Neville.
Oh, thank you. Good, I would say, good luck Sunday. All right, Mike, thanks very much. Thanks to Liz and everyone. Over to you guys. Brilliant again. Thanks, Mike. Brilliant.